everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our Meet the Analyst webinar, How to Win Over Today's Evolving Omnichannel Fashion Consumer. I'm your host, Susie David Canyon, head of the retail and e-commerce practice at Insider Intelligence in New York. And I'm joined by my colleague, senior analyst Skye Canaves in Texas. Hi, Skye.
Hi, Susie. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. Before we get into the main presentation, I'd like to thank Shoplazza for making today's webinar possible, and welcome Luk Chan, Associate Director of Global Key Accounts at Shoplazza. Luk is joining us from Ottawa. Hi, Luk.
Greetings to Susie, Scott, and everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Well, we're so excited to have you. Thanks for joining us. A few things before we dive in. We have a ton of information to share, but there's no need to take notes. We'll email you a link to view the slides and the full recording. But we do want you to participate. Just use the chat window on the right to submit questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A. So with that, Skye, let's get started. What's on the agenda for today?
Thanks, Susie. So I'll dive right in and get started with an overview of today's presentation. I'll start by looking at the current state of fashion e-commerce, including some of our latest forecast data. Next, I'll present some key findings from our exclusive survey of apparel consumers, which covers what they really want, both online and offline, when it comes to shopping for clothes. After that, I'll look ahead at what's on the horizon for fashion retail, with a focus on major emerging trends. And then I'll take a look at some case studies and best practices from leading retailers of apparel, and how they're meeting the needs of today's consumers in increasingly creative ways. So this year, there's been a lot of discussion about the prospects for e-commerce coming off of the big pandemic acceleration, how online retail is struggling as consumers return to stores where they're doing more of their shopping than was actually anticipated this year. But for apparel, despite the challenges, e-commerce will continue to grow. We forecast continued strong growth for apparel and accessories e-commerce in the US, from 36% of sales today up to 48% in 2026. This is our latest forecast from last month, June, and it shows a slight decrease from our February forecast. Previously, we anticipated that apparel e-commerce was going across the 50% threshold in 2025, and I think that milestone is now still a few years off. But from the pandemic, there are really a lot of important consumer behaviors and expectations around shopping for clothes that developed during this time, and these are going to stick around. They've given rise to a new baseline for apparel retailing, and retailers that fail to deliver are going to lose out among consumers, especially now that they're spending a little less freely than they were a year ago. So clothing is by far the most purchased category online. This is from our latest bi-monthly biz rate survey in June. It shows that 58% of digital buyers had purchased clothing online in the last month. And we see even more of that among women and the older millennial Gen X demographic. During the pandemic times, Amazon emerged as the biggest US retailer for apparel. Among Amazon Prime members, clothing is again the most purchased category, and at an even higher level. Again, this is from June 2022. We see nearly 2/3 of respondents had made a purchase of clothing in the past month on the marketplace. And this correlates well with our apparel retail survey from the end of 2021. That was not only Prime members, but there we saw 67% of the respondents stating that they'd purchased clothing from Amazon in the previous 12 months. And that was about 10 percentage points higher than the next retailer on the list, which was Walmart. So it's really about convenience, that fast and free shipping for Prime members, as well as ease of returns, multiple options for getting goods back to Amazon, and even new features like Prime Try Before You Buy, where you can try on clothes at home sent by Amazon before you buy them. And though in terms of fashion brands, particularly, Amazon has been a little bit more challenged when it comes to becoming a destination for fashion and product discovery. We see a lot of consumer apparel spending taking place online, and we don't expect that to shift this year. In terms of survey spending, and this is from our apparel retail survey at the end of 2021, we asked for estimates of consumer apparel spending that was taking place online, and the average of close to 60% was pretty much the same from the previous 12 months as the expectation for the next 12 months. And we see that trend across most generations. The only real departure is boomers who expected to spend more in stores this year. We also sought to gauge consumer preferences in terms of how they shop across channels. And we found that online plays a role in most apparel shopping today. Nearly half of the 18 to 40-year-old group in particular prefers online-only shopping. And more than a quarter of this group prefers to browse online and purchase in stores. Only boomers showed a marked preference for fully in-store shopping, and relatively few shoppers said they prefer to engage in showrooming, or the practice of browsing in stores and then later purchasing online. Most of our respondents also said that they'd shop for clothing in stores in 2021. But what's interesting here is how much mobile is catching up to stores, especially among younger consumers. And within mobile, browsers still lead, but apps are not far behind. And we see apps as really a key part of the connected consumer strategy for fashion retail. And when fashion consumers buy online, how are they getting their purchases? Home delivery still leads, but we can really see the huge gains made by click and collect, particularly store pickup for apparel. And millennials lead the way here, as they do with most of these alternative fulfillment methods. So retailers expanded these services greatly during the pandemic, and now they're really focusing on how they can refine them.
I find this part really interesting because depending on the category, right, Sky, there are some for click and collect, there are some that it's better for curbside pickup than it is for in-store. So it's interesting to see that for apparel, it's really in-store pickup that leads the way.
Right. We had another survey of digital grocery buyers late last year, and their curbside was the clear preference. And that makes sense given that grocery items tend to be bulky and it's more convenient to have them placed in your cars. For apparel, however, consumers might prefer to go into a store where they can pick up their purchase, try it on, and then return or exchange whatever items don't fit, like right on the spot. And this is something that retailers should keep in mind. You know, they can boost convenience, for example, by offering like dedicated pickup counters and having fitting rooms nearby and making it easy for people to then exchange the items as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are some of the big picture considerations in the state of fashion e-commerce. And next, I'll turn in more detail to the findings from our apparel consumer survey. This survey sought to gauge consumer preferences regarding a total of 47 apparel retail features across 7 categories, covering both online and in-store shopping experiences. We asked consumers to rate these features on a 5-point scale from extremely valuable to not valuable at all. So what I'll present are the findings on those extremely valuable ratings across the top features in each category. First, I'll share the top 5 features overall. 4 of the 5 of these fell under the membership category, specifically features that consumers value in paid membership programs, and most revolve around free shipping and returns. These perks will remain top of mind as apparel spending continues to shift online. Here's a big overview of the 7 categories we covered in our consumer survey, along with the top 3 features for each category, which I'll turn to next in order of how much weight was given to each category. First, what was most important to consumers? Free shipping, free returns, followed by free shipping. So Amazon Prime has really raised the stakes for retailers across the board by setting expectations that need to be matched as part of paid programs or for free. Now, some retailers have these as part of paid memberships. Some retailers will offer these as part of free memberships or loyalty programs, and others like Nordstrom offer all shoppers free shipping with no minimum purchase and free returns as well. The next set of features that consumers valued the most were connected to delivery and the post-purchase experience, returning products across channels, and somewhat interestingly, the option to have store purchases delivered to the home. And a guest checkout option, or not having to log in to checkout, was also fairly important. It was in the top quarter of features overall. So turning next to digital tools that enhance the in-store shopping experience, we see that Transparency, savings, and product information were all key things that consumers were looking for. Consumer adoption of in-store technology was fairly high. Nearly half of the respondents in our survey reported to having scanned a code or tag associated with an item of clothing, and most of those did so to obtain product information. Now, as we move down, these categories were somewhat less in demand among apparel consumers, but we still want to point out what we can learn about consumer preferences from these. For example, in payments, speed is key to reduce the friction that often results in cart abandonment online, and also to make store checkout faster. Crowds and long lines were among the most frequently cited pain points in an open-ended question we asked respondents about on in-store shopping. They said they didn't want to go to stores because it's too crowded and the lines were too long. On the search and filtering front, transparency around inventory levels was a top feature, although this does create a bit of a conundrum for retailers right now. If there's a lot of stock and you let shoppers know, they might hold out to see if they can get a better deal later on or somewhere else. But if there's low stock messaging displayed, that can increase the chances of an immediate sale. The e-commerce shopping experience features that we grouped together, these were on the whole the second least valued category, although the top rated feature is connected to discounts, which are becoming more and more important to shoppers now in the current economic climate. And finally, last in our category rankings were the cutting edge tools. The digital bells and whistles. Demand for them just remains pretty muted still, and it was really the practical tool involving 3D or 360-degree product visualization. This was what garnered the most interest, and that was followed by virtual stores and visual search, while things like crypto payments and AR or VR try-ons were less sought after.
This is my favorite reminder for retailers and brands because there's so much media buzz around some of these tech-forward features like virtual try-ons. But if you don't get the basics right, I think consumers just won't come to you. And so I feel like this is just a good reminder.
Yeah, of offering value where consumers want it the most. And so now that we've reviewed what consumers told us about what they value, let's look ahead to what's on the horizon for fashion retail in this new environment. So one of the big developments since our survey took place is, of course, the blistering pace of inflation and the pressures that's putting on the consumer economy as a whole. While the latest figures from June show that consumer spending overall is being maintained, there are real questions about how long this can be sustained, and we're already seeing shifts in spending habits, and consumers are all around citing inflation as a top concern right now. And we can see by looking at the categories that consumers prioritize, unfortunately, fashion is pretty low on the list. And it's also one of the top categories where consumers are cutting back because they can in a way that they can't for things like grocery and gas. And if we dive a little deeper into apparel subcategories, though, we see that the impacts are pretty widely dispersed. And this is not a fashion-specific phenomenon. I think we've seen recently a lot of major retailers reporting surprise at consumer demand differing from what they had forecast, and the repercussions have been pretty varied. So Target, for example, has a lot of excess inventory. They're overstocked on things like home goods, and that was bad news. But other retailers like Nordstrom and Ulta Beauty have been pleasantly surprised by demand for dressy wear and makeup because people want to go out and enjoy themselves again. So with all of these shifts, I think it underscores that retailers have to be very nimble, keeping close tabs on what consumers are looking for and being able to respond to that. And one important way to do that is by looking at private label goods for multi-brand retailers. They're an important way to connect with consumers that can respond to both consumer demand for value and presenting an opportunity to capture some of the white space among consumer needs in apparel. More than half of consumers we surveyed in a separate survey in January had already purchased private label apparel, and another quarter expressed a willingness to purchase. And from our apparel consumer survey, we found the categories they're most interested in when it comes to private label include denim and jeans, t-shirts, athletic wear, as well as underwear. Another big concern for apparel retailers is how to manage online return rates. This is one of the biggest challenges because apparel overall is a category that sees some of the highest return rates in general, as we can see here. And for online purchases, that's much higher. And recently, we've been hearing a lot about retailers starting to take steps to manage that. For example, in the UK, the retailers Zara and Boohoo have started charging consumers for returns, online returns. And that's a separate fee from shipping. That's like an online return fee. And the risk here is that these new fees could really alienate consumers who we know they highly value free returns. It's the most valued apparel retail feature. So retailers can look to technology to help reduce return rates through things like fitting tools, the 360 or 3D product visualization, and even AR try-ons. Although I think part of the current low interest among apparel consumers in AR and VR try-ons kind of reflects a lack of experience. Only 9% of our survey respondents had ever used virtual try-on using AR or VR technology. But clothing we see is a top category of interest for try-ons before purchasing. Another big trend that we follow closely is fashion resale. And this is one that's really here to stay. Fashion resale marketplace sales on digital platforms will grow 46.6% to 15.5 billion this year, according to our forecast. And this represents a near tripling of the market between 2021 and 2025. Much of these sales take place on third-party marketplaces like Poshmark or ThredUp, but now fashion brands are increasingly seeking to capture a share of this resale market through their own operations. Usually they'll work with a white label service provider rather than building out their own resale operations from scratch, because those are pretty complex. A big driver of the interest in resale is the young consumer. Nearly 80% in the 18 to 34 group expect to engage with digital fashion resale. And according to our online fashion resale forecast, these consumers are going to be spending a lot more on a per buyer basis on resale in the coming years, as the younger groups gain more spending power. And resale is really a way that brands can establish long-term circular relationships with consumers. It offers value, it offers an entry point for new shoppers, and the ongoing transactions of buying and trading and selling really help support sustainability in fashion and ongoing relationships with the consumers. And another trend that's pretty specific to the young consumer is virtual fashion. And I'd be remiss not to mention one of the biggest buzzwords in fashion and overall in tech in the last year, the metaverse, which, while it doesn't really exist yet, fashion brands have really taken the lead in experimenting with what's possible through virtual fashion. For now, the virtual worlds we have are mainly in games, and the huge interest in gaming means that many players have already engaged with digital fashion by buying skins for their virtual avatars. Nearly half of the 18 to 34 group here has either purchased or is interested in virtual apparel. And that's a huge skew from the overall rate of just 13% combined. So it's really a trend that resonates with young consumers. And so next, I'd like to take a look at a couple of retailers who are making some of the best efforts in some of the areas I've discussed today. When we look at fashion retailers that offer the most features that are valued by consumers, Nordstrom really stood out. As I mentioned earlier, they offer free shipping on all orders with no minimum and free returns. And these are big selling points for online apparel buyers. Their app also helps to connect the digital experience with a high level of customer service in stores, and they really offer a top-notch store experience.
They really do. I remember when we went to go visit the flagship store in New York, Sky, and remember how we went to go look at all the features. And to your point earlier about pickup in store, they had this beautiful area downstairs where you could go pick up your curbside pickup in store. There were couches, there were fitting rooms. It was like your living room sort of made it super easy, which was really good to see.
Right. It felt really like a luxury concierge service. And Nordstrom offers enough price points that it's not a pure luxury store, but you go in and you feel like you're in a luxury store. And the accessible price points they offer as well really make anyone, me, feel like I want to buy something new and discover new things. There are always new, it seems like there are always new things to discover in a
It's just
Nordstrom
totally,
store.
and the energy and the
Mm.
customer service. I mean, it all comes together so nicely.
Yeah. And another retailer that does a really great job at bridging the digital and physical realms of shopping is Nike. And traditionally, Nike's been more of a brand than a retailer, most of its distribution coming via wholesale. But one of the major shifts it's made in strategy recently is to leverage the power of the Nike brand that it's built up over the years to go to direct to consumer. This not only increases profitability, but also gives them greater control over their relationships with consumers. Nike really aims to build a sense of community around the brand, both online and in person. It has numerous apps, not just for shopping, like the main shopping app and the sneakers app, but it also has community apps like the Run Club and Training Club. And we can see the trajectory of its direct-to-consumer growth here in this chart. And it's continuing to gain more direct-to-consumer dollars through its apps, its store innovations, and even virtual fashion. It recently acquired an NFT sneaker brand, RTFK, or Artifact, and they're going all in on virtual sneakers and virtual fashion. So Amazon is a newcomer to physical retail for apparel, and this is its latest experiment with stores. Amazon has had a bit of a mixed record with stores. It's closed down its bookstores and 4-star stores recently. It's sticking with grocery for now. And the new Amazon style stores, so the first one opened in California earlier this year. These stores are now serving as showrooms for what it's presenting as digitally connected shopping experiences. Features that they have include things like using the Amazon app to have clothing brought to your fitting room, being able to purchase things in the store and have them delivered home to your home, and saving wish lists from the store so that you can buy them online later. And another thing Amazon might do here is leverage store traffic data to give brands more insights on consumer habits. This is something they've started to do with grocery, and we could easily see it being rolled out to the Amazon fashion and apparel stores as they open more of them. And another retailer that's doing really interesting things to connect with consumers is REI. It's integrating resale with loyalty. And shifting from what it previously offered as in-person members only garage sales that were like a couple of times a year to now ongoing resale both in stores and online. And it presents that as part of their loyalty program. So you have to be a member, even though it's a very low cost membership program with a lifetime fee. And it's offering benefits, offering greater value to consumers who are becoming more budget conscious nowadays. And it can introduce new consumers to the brand, as well as really boosting its sustainability credentials as an outdoor retailer. So for key takeaways from this, retailers should really focus on features that are most in demand among consumers. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's free returns and free shipping, and that's really part of the Amazon effect long-term. Prepare for the broad impacts of inflation by adding value as much as possible, and then incorporating some of the best practices from industry leaders in fashion retail. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Susie.
Sorry, I jumped the gun there. That was great, Skye. Thanks so much. Before we get to your questions live, we're now joined by Luk Chan, Associate Director of Global Key Accounts at Shoplazza. Welcome, Luk. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Susie. It's a great pleasure.
So let's get started. What are some of the post-pandemic trends you're seeing in e-commerce across the apparel industry?
Well, it's a great question because into the third quarter of this year, the e-commerce high growth ratio fell back slightly as in-person shopping venues gradually open to the public. For us, it kind resets the path for the apparel commerce sectors, even a strong rebound, which is happening in the in-person shopping sector as well. But consumers are becoming way more cautious and mindful than before. So they look for the true value return from each purchase. So and besides, they tend to vote their dollars to the brands that are willing to invest in streaming areas, like allowing shoppers to place orders across all possible digital platforms and channels. a more immersive shopping environment in terms of offering more realistic and more precise visualization of the products and more measurable virtual sizing solutions. Last one, probably the most important one, as Sky also mentioned, excellent handling of shipping and the return process. So as you can see, the future of apparel commerce, both offline, online, the boundary is disappearing somehow in some ways. And it's not just about the process of transactions, but it's really calling back to one basic issue. So how to connect it to your consumers by showing the brand authenticity through each merchant interactions with your consumers.
Well, and I think to your point, with the world opening back up again and folks going back to in-store shopping, for Shoplazza as an e-commerce platform, how can you help improve or even elevate the digital shopping experience so that your merchants can compete with the in-store experience?
Well, it's a great question. Also involves different levels of efforts from Shoplazza, and because it's a behind scene e-commerce platform. Because also we vision ourselves as one evolving operating system for the brands powered by Shoplazza. That means we are mobilizing all resources and tools to help our merchants to adapt it to this coming evolving commercial environment where digital commerce is deeply rooted and embedded with the physical infrastructures. So currently we are leveraging the physical shipping and the warehousing capacities through very close partnerships with different product sourcing and fulfillment partners around the world. So these are the critical components for Shoplazza's coming worldwide network in terms of offering better product sourcing, order delivery, and the faster return capacities. On the other side, in order to help our global merchants to evolve from the traditional online shopping settings into gradually into the future immersive environment, we're collaborating with different partners as well to lower the technical barriers for brands, especially for small to medium merchants to acquire and utilize the latest, also cheaper technologies to power their online operations. For simple examples, we're currently working with different tech vendors in field of 3D modeling and AR shopping tools like Sky has mentioned. Our efforts in these areas aim to optimize and maximize the currently available mobile technology and the capacities. So in this case, merchants can simply use their smartphones to scan a product and simply convert them into a visual presentation with a 360-degree view. On the other side, for the consumers, they are able to directly use their mobile phones to simulate and mirror how the product is tried on, or even in the future remotely visit the store. But of course, AR still has a long way to be adopted into the real commercial practices. But with the current speed of innovation and investments into this field, AR commerce will eventually come and play a much more important way in our real life. Also, we as platform, we also have to get ready. We need to help our merchants to get ready for this new wave of technology.
Right, and giving exposure, I think, especially to consumers, is really helpful. Another challenge that sometimes retailers face, especially online, is traffic. It's central, it's critical, but it's also really hard to get sometimes. What is your strategy to help your clients establish omnichannel retail solutions that help drive traffic?
Well, it's a tough question. It's for being omnipresent isn't easy for anyone. Also, being omnipresent requires a full cycle of business support and the solutions. Therefore, through our deep integrations with the global partners and constant iteration of our own system, our merchants can easily execute any digital marketing related operations from one portal, the Shoplazza back system. For examples, at Shoplazza Google portal, merchants can embed different Google accounts into our system, simply use the free and built-in product feeds auditing tools to make sure the product specification descriptions, metadata, and all the details match the Google policy, because it's very strict and rigorous. So afterwards, they can start to upload their local inventories and start to deliver their digital ads and product listings to their desired target markets and the countries. So likewise with Facebook and Meta, merchants can create Facebook global storefronts in terms of being simple. That's the Facebook shops, and upload local inventories to the shop directly from our backend as well. So in that case, they don't have to edit all these complicated product feeds again for the second time, for the third time. Furthermore, with our recent partnership with TikTok, merchants can simply create the product log, a catalog, and import the product feeds to create TikTok ads, also just from Shoplazza backend as well. In addition, we also offer a bunch of free and built-in SEO tools to help the merchants simplify the process of optimizing the web pages, product pages, the sitemap. So in this case, their commercial e-commerce online store website and content visibility can be effectively improved without any costs. One last thing I think worth mentioning is Shoplazza is one of the very few e-commerce platforms already integrated with Google Performance Max to allow merchants to understand way better about online shoppers' behavioral patterns, from the data collected via different channels, via different platforms, into one simple analytic dashboard. So in the meantime, they can still follow the new and very rigorous data privacy law.
That's great, because we know data is so important to help build out strategies. I have one more question for you, if you don't mind. I'm really curious, with China's strict public policies that have impacted global supply chains, how does your strategy help international merchants and shoppers receive orders from direct-to-consumer manufacturers within a satisfactory timeframe? We already know that free delivery is critical, but also timeliness is important.
Well, it's indeed, I totally agree with you. It's a very tough, difficult situations which is happening in China. But before the transportation and shipping capacities from China can fully resume to the pre-pandemic level, we are currently working out with different fulfillment and shipping partners, like for example, like Cainiao International from Alibaba, or CG Dropshipping, one of a very important platform partner, to leverage their current network of global smart warehouses, plus their shipping resources to help our brands to store and ship our orders to more than 150 countries. In this case, our merchants, no matter where they are located, they can all utilize Shoplazza's global warehousing network to store and offer fast order delivery to their target markets and targeted regions or countries. So in addition to the cross-border storage and the shipping capacities, we are also accelerating the speed of constructing the global product sourcing platform, where merchants can source the products from their nearest locations to the nearest physical locations, or to the nearest target markets or the countries or regions. So as a result, it would definitely and significantly reduce the shipping time over time, and helping our merchants and brands to create a way better shopping experience to their consumers. I'm sorry. So for Shoplazza, because we started our business by leading China and Asia-based manufacturing businesses to explore and dig into the global markets in terms of offering cross-border e-commerce solutions and D2C services. So our key is always to focus on to how to help our brands acquire access to more qualified and more local resources through the global infrastructure that we are currently working on. Our goal is very simple, actually. So we try to offer a better service package with a broader spectrum of supply chain, a better and cheaper global fulfillment network and resources, also simplified tools to extend the digital brand presence onto every possible channel and platform for our brands and merchants around the globe.
That's so great. Thanks, Luke. It's really interesting to hear how you guys are helping scale brands, and you're really part of the entire retail ecosystem. So now it's time to get our audience Q&A. We've received a lot of great questions, so we'll get started right away. The first question is, what trends are you all seeing in this year's back-to-school shopping? And are you seeing anything specifically in the mix between online and store shopping?
So I think that consumers are still prioritizing back to school spending this year, even as they seek out deals and cut back in other areas. And I think we'll see healthy spending Amazon Prime Day, which traditionally kicks off the back to school shopping season here in the US, had very strong results this year. And I think there's an NRF survey that found that most respondents, most consumers were planning to start their spending in the week of Amazon Prime Day. A lot of them going to Amazon and a lot of them going to other online outlets. I think store demand will still be pretty strong. There's been healthy demand for store shopping, kind of one-stop shopping in particular. This will benefit big box retailers like Walmart because consumers maybe want to make fewer shopping trips nowadays and spend less time driving around to get places. But so far it's pretty healthy. I think there'll be more spending on apparel in particular, as opposed to, say, technology, which people kind of stocked up with on over the past 2 years and may not yet need to replace. So I think apparel is poised for a strong comeback. And we may see more online spending for apparel because the prices are coming down and it can be easier to find deals and do price comparison shopping online versus going to stores.
Sorry, just to chip into just to add on to Sky's analysis, because we as a platform, what we have observed is a very strong and major driving force behind BTS, the back to school purchases, is really from the Gen Z consumers, in terms of, because they're looking for more customized items, more personalized items to reflect their ideologies, hobbies, political views. So in this case, we have observed a strong booming in the field of print-on-demand business. So also we've also observed this age group of consumers, they start to shift from the traditional apparel vendors. They start to adopt, those service vendors who offer cheaper options while they can be involved into the design process of the products that they will actually receive onto the hand. Also, another factor from the platform or from the merchant side perspective is because we are implementing more alternative payments. So in this case, people can really purchase the items with fairly large value into several installation of the payments with interest-free. So these two key elements, they kind of facilitate the seasonal purchases from our view.
It's true. We do talk a lot about buy now, pay later, and how that's really helped spur spending. I think this might tie in nicely to the second question that we got from the audience, which is, how do we think current economic trends are going to impact the holiday season?
Yeah, well, we're still in the middle of back to school shopping, but we can certainly look ahead at the holiday season. I think inflation is going to be putting a damper on holiday spending this year because consumers are just going to start to feel more tapped out by the end of the year, particularly those at lower income levels. And we know Americans have already been dipping into the big cushion of savings that they built up during the pandemic or over the previous 2 years. And I think this summer, we're also seeing a lot of travel activity, and that's gotten a lot more expensive. So it's a question of how much is going to be left at the end of the year for holiday shopping, and then whether consumers will want to continue shopping and then just finance it on credit cards or buy now, pay later if they don't have the cash on hand to pay for those purchases. Another interesting trend, I think, with holiday shopping this year is when it's going to take place or when more of it will take place. Our colleague Andrew Lipsman put out a holiday recap report earlier this year, recapping the 2021 season, where he talked about the new holiday calendar of earlier sales. And that was really driven in the past 2 years by consumers wanting to get ahead of supply chain worries and get the products they wanted earlier so that they know they get their presents in time. And we saw, for example, Amazon launched a series of deals in October last year. And now this year, it's actually anticipating a second sort of Prime Day equivalent for October as well. And so I think this year we'll also start to see more earlier promotions from retailers, particularly those that have a lot of excess inventory on hand that they want to get rid of well before the year ends. And, if inflation doesn't start tapering off significantly in the next couple of months, I think shoppers will also be looking to do more of their shopping earlier when it will be a little bit cheaper, to avoid higher prices even later on. So this could all help pull more demand into October and maybe even earlier.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Luke. No, please go ahead.
Sorry, just adding on to what Sky has said. Also, I have to speak from the perspective of the platform again, because from our perspective, based on the macroeconomic level, current macroeconomic level, one of the decisive element is really the level of disposable income from the individuals or each household. Also, it really depends on the current situation of the economy, how well the manufacturing industry is booming across North America. Another factor really to counterbalance, the economic elements, which is the desire for people to return to the nature after getting cooped up at home after whole 2 years. So we from our merchants who offer the gear, like the outdoor gears like camping tools, tents, diving gears, inflatable boats in that sector. All these this industry is really boosting since last year because people long to go back to their previous way of life. So these are two very interesting elements we also observed, as also Sky has mentioned. The buy now pay later is a great facilitator to in this matter, because people are confident in the later power of generating their household income. So I believe this is generally reflecting the confidence for people for the coming economy, I think.
Right. I think, inflation is on everyone's mind, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, how early the sales get pulled forward, and also just how value-driven retailers are going to be in their messaging. It'll be very interesting to see. Definitely a year like no other. I'm going to switch gears now with the next question, which is around live streaming. And do we have any data on consumer interest in live streaming or adoption of live streaming from a shopping perspective? Anybody who's doing a good job? What can you tell us about live streaming? We know it's popular.
Yeah, so we actually did ask about apparel shopping via live stream video in our survey. And surprisingly, it was one of the least in-demand features in terms of being rated as extremely valuable. I think it was only a little bit ahead of like crypto payments, which weren't highly valued at all. So that was a little surprising to me. I know I've seen from our other bi-monthly consumer surveys that cover usage and interest more generally, not just limited to apparel retail, that there has been gradual increase in usage and adoption. That is, people saying they've used live stream shopping or they're interested in using it, at least somewhat interested. So it's nowhere near mainstream yet, but it's starting to get there. We did see an uptick of interest as well around the holiday season, when I think a lot of retailers and brands started trying out live stream shopping campaigns. And right now we're really seeing like bigger pushes from, for example, YouTube into live stream shopping. This week they just announced expansion of Shopify's partnership with Google to bring more live stream shopping onto YouTube. So Shopify merchants will be able to link their Shopify stores with their YouTube channels. So it's really, YouTube is making a big push into shoppable video, and live streaming is certainly part of that.
And Luke, are you seeing your merchant partners trying to roll out live streaming more?
Yeah, because we have around 360,000 merchants around the world. Also, we just did a recent survey with our Canadian and US-based consumers. Surprisingly, despite this cultural differences, so we believe global audience gradually adapted to the short videos, but really it sets for us, it sets a great foundation for the future commercial live streaming services. Currently, people are still staggering on getting the real conversion from the live streaming, but we believe it takes time for people to adopt this new type of shopping methods. Also, another thing worth mentioning, I believe, is it really depends on the capacity, the intensity of also the consistency, how well the influencers, the brand, the merchants can produce the contents in those ways. So content creation is always a center to be focused for attracting people coming back to your channel, coming back to your to watch your videos, also coming back to your live streaming. So how to integrate entertainment also with the commercial way of selling products. So it's a challenge for everyone, not just the Chinese brands, also for the global brands, for the global influencers as well. So I think it does take time, both for the influencers, for the brands, also for the consumers to adapt to the live streaming across different platforms, not just the TikTok, but also, as Sky mentioned, onto YouTube. Also, we have seen the live streaming services on Facebook as well. So that's something pretty interesting that we have observed.
That's so cool. Another thing, so one of the other questions, which is similar to what we're saying in terms of what people are saying they want to do and then what they actually do. And one of the questions was around sustainability or other cause-related features. And did we look into that, and what are consumers saying about that? And the example was Everlane offers customers at checkout the chance to round up their bill and to offset their gas emissions for shipping. And so I have two more questions, but we technically only have time for one. So I'm going to ask for a very quick answer on this one so that I can ask you the last question. Sustainability, other cause-related features, how are we feeling about that?
So we didn't cover this specifically as a feature in our survey, since things like what Everlane's doing are so brand specific or retailer specific that it would be hard to compare. But we did include sustainability when we asked people about their top considerations in choosing a retailer to buy from, either online or in store. And it didn't rank terribly highly, although it was a little more valued by the younger and consumers, as well as those who spend more on clothes, not necessarily wealthier, but the ones who do more apparel spending are a little more conscious of the impact of their spending.
That's interesting. Luke, is this something that you're talking about with merchants around sustainability, or not yet? There are so many other things to worry about.
Well, currently it's not yet fully implemented, or adopted by most of the merchants, because it's really related to the costs and the level of acceptance from the consumers. But we are trying to get to more eco partners. So for example, just to get more eco-friendly shopping bags, or maybe reduce on the overall packaging capacity. So in that case, we are talking to different partners. Also, we are collaborating with our merchants. So, but we do believe this is a trend. It must come and up. But another factor I have to mention is because we still have to have these packagings to sustain the unforeseeable elements coming from the fulfillment or the shipping process. So sometimes, let's say, the more eco-friendly packagings may not sustain that much of the difficult process. But I think this is an area definitely a lot of merchants, a lot of platforms are looking to it. But we believe this is the future.
Good. That's nice to hear. So my last question, I promise, this is the last one. Is try-on technology more widely used in certain category types, like makeup and beauty, for example, or is it really more widely used everywhere?
Beauty has been really one of the leading categories. And I think it's just because the technology works better for beauty right now. For things like trying on makeup, it's a lot easier to kind of do AR for makeup filters, lipstick or eyeshadow than it is for clothing, where you have to really deal with the volume, or footwear where size and very specific fit issues are so important. Another category that's pretty big is home furnishings and home goods. So you can visualize and kind of decorate your home, or even home improvement in these areas, because it's not quite as focused on the volume, and it's not quite as complex to get the proper technology. Like I've tried on a lot of apparel, AR try-ons, and the technology is a bit hit or miss. It's not quite there yet. Someday it will be, but I think it's still going to require some significant advances in what we can do with particularly with our mobile phones.
Right. I do think about that watch brand that you can try the watch on from the comfort of your own home with AR, VR technology, which is kind of cool. But you're right. I'm not sure that we're there quite yet.
And one of the AR technology pioneers, Perfect Corp, I think they're working on this too, and they've talked about the challenges just of how different it is to work with people's hands and measuring the hands versus faces, because they already have so much technology around people's faces and like the very specific points, identifying points of facial features versus hand features, which are very different to them. And so they're just not there yet, or are getting there, but it's taking time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again to Sky for joining us.
Thanks, Susie.
And a very special thanks to Luk and to the team at Shoplazza.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, everyone. It's a big pleasure of being here.
We were happy to have you both. And we want to thank our eMarketer production crew behind the scenes. They also deserve a huge thank you for making this webinar possible. As promised, we'll be emailing you a link to the slides and the full recording soon. Before we wrap up, though, let me take a moment to tell you what's happening across eMarketer's media channels. You can register for upcoming live Analyst and Tech Talk webinars at emarketer.com/webinars. On the audio side, don't forget to tune in to our Reimagining Retail podcast every Wednesday, wherever you listen to podcasts. And finally, please check out our newsletters. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.